Hi, sir. Thank you for giving me an interview for Dalit Camera. And here we want to have your opinion on the recent incident and the protest which is happening across India. The protest against the ban of Ambedkar Periyar Study Circle of IIT Madras. This happened some months before, and there is a large scale protest is happening across Tamil Nadu started and later part. That is one side. It was MHRD involvement, which is a BJP government, Smriti Irani. And also the IIT students have been complaining that they have been interfering into the dining halls of having different sets of dining halls for vegetarians and non-vegetarians. So here there is one BJP government which bans Ambedkar Periyar Study Circle, and at the same time they're also influencing the other IITs and with the dining halls and everything. At the same time, other side of the coin, what they're doing is they're appropriating Ambedkar, and what they have done is they have brought up a special issue about on Ambedkar and glorifying him, and in the sense in RSS claims glorifying, which means he's a pro-Hindutva kind of a thing. So that how do you see these both the things?
See, both these things are interconnected. I would say this banning of Ambedkar Periyar Study Circle in IIT Madras has wonderfully acted as a catalyst for the mobilization of anti-caste groups, secular-minded people and democratic forces all over India. Besides inviting expressions of solidarity from some of the notable intellectuals from abroad. The APCSC is a continuation of the protests dating back to the early 2000s against the blatant discrimination of the Dalits and OBCs by the Indian Institute of Technology Madras authorities. That this institution is a veritable Brahmin Agrahara can be shown by the fact that even today, that of nearly 400 faculty members, only 3 are Dalits, and the PhD students from the Dalit communities constitute just 0.3%. The banning of APCC is only a tiny part of the counter-revolution of Brahmin Baniya combine that is unfolding before our eyes. As Baba Saheb Ambedkar pointed out in what Congress and Gandhi had done to untouchables, the Brahmins always needed allies. In ancient times, the pen of the Brahmins combined with the sword of the Kshatriyas to keep the vast majority of the people in Indian subcontinent in utter subordination. But in the changed circumstances of the modern times, the cunningness of the Brahmins and the money power of the Vaisyas, that means the Baniyas, joined together to devise new means and methods to perpetuate their hegemony and domination. As the previous Manmohan Singh government has already set the stage for pushing the new liberalism to the extreme. So the RSS is now find it encouraged to expend its energy in strengthening its cultural nationalism that would help diffusing the anger of the masses of India, the anger generated by the blatantly anti-farmer, anti-Adivasi, anti-Dalit and anti-labor policies pursued by the Modi Sarkar. From this strategy flows the varied attempts to Brahminize the minds of the people from the OBC and Dalit communities, and direct their anger not against the corporate capitalism, not against the casteism, and not against imperialism, but against the religious minorities by painting them as the devil incarnate. This is quite similar to Hitler's scapegoating of Jews for all the ills of Germany. That's one thing. The Brahminizing of the minds of the people is not a new phenomenon. one of the recent landmark successes of Brahminization was the destruction of Babri Masjid. The destruction facilitated by the complicity of Narasimha Rao-led Congress government. But even during the days of VP Singh government, which was dependent on the support from outside of the BJP, Sangh Parivar could dictate its terms. For example, it successfully scuttled the efforts of the Income Tax Department to proceed against the VHP, since VHP failed to file income tax returns and failed to explain and give the detailed accounts of its income and expenditure. With Vajpayee in saddle, the Sangh Parivar could penetrate and put its eggs in all the spheres and organs of the state machinery, particularly the army. The revision of the textbooks was commenced with full zeal, and the retired teacher and semi-literate Dinanath Batra was assigned important responsibilities even during Vajpayee days. Then Savarkar's portrait was unveiled in Parliament, and even the left parties decided to make only a feeble protest just a few days before that event. But the members of the so-called secular parties, which were allies of the BJP government, the DMK, and the AIDMK, which was in the opposition, and some of the Dalit parties, such as one led by Ram Vilas Paswan, happily participated in that event. Of course, Paswan resigned in protest against the Gujarat atrocities, but other parties remained passive onlookers of the murderous attacks on the Muslims, which has been evolved as a model for ethnic lynching of religious minorities in the rest of the country. But Sangh Parivar has not changed its colors, but unfortunately Paswan has changed. Modi may speak of Gandhi, especially during his foreign trips, but when he returns to the home turf, he reduces the icon of Gandhi just to cleanliness. For the Sangh Parivar and other right-wing Hindu outfits, it is not Gandhi, but Godse is the leader. But Godse is an assassin. We may not like Gandhi, we may disagree with Gandhi, but we cannot approve of any political assassination. So this kind of assassins can be venerated only by some hot-headed bigots, including one or two MPs from the BJP. But he cannot be projected, Godse cannot be projected by the national leader. And they don't like Nehru. BJP and RSS do not like Nehru for their own reasons. Nehru's policies were flawed. We cannot endorse his policies completely. But whatever may be his drawbacks, in the popular perception, he is considered as one who belonged to the secular club and one who was wedded to welfareism. So on both counts, Sangh Parivar finds him guilty. So that's why they try to wipe out his name from the history books and from the memory of the people. So Nehru is ruled out. So other choice for the Sangh Parivar to project as the national leader is Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. But unfortunately, even Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel actually creates some kind of reservations in the minds of the RSS because he was a right-winger. But as the Home Minister at the time of assassination of Gandhi, he squarely blamed the RSS for the complicity in Gandhi's murder. So however much, the RSS and the Parivar may be soft on Patel, and wholeheartedly they cannot endorse him as the national leader. So Patel is also ruled out. So at the earlier period, they tried to project Deen Dayal Upadhyaya as the national leader. But he was very little known outside his home turf. And what happened is the theory of integral humanism and could not be made acceptable to the people. It was actually a Varna Dharma ideology couched in a very modern language. So it was too obvious to be pushed through. So naturally it also went into oblivion. So what is the next choice? I have been thinking about it. So then during the Vajpayee government days, as I earlier said, they tried to project P.D. Savarkar as the great freedom fighter and the national leader. But unfortunately, as irrefutable historical evidences and documentary evidences point out, he actually apologized to the British government. Later on, he was even willing to cooperate with the British government. So he was a fake hero. So he cannot be projected as a national leader. Then Golwalkar was the spiritual guru. But can Golwalkar be projected as the national leader? But even for RSS, it's self-embarrassing. Because Golwalkar was an open supporter of Hitler. And he endorsed Hitler's method of ethnic cleansing. Not only that, he opposed the framing of modern Indian constitution. He said Manusmriti should be the constitution of India. So naturally, then even RSS is really ashamed of projecting Golwalkar, though they still consider him as their spiritual guru, as the national leader. Then what about Dr. Munje? Munje was not, he was also one of the co-founders of the RSS. Initially, he was the leader of the Hindu Mahasabha. But everyone knows his connections with the fascists of Italy and his personal contacts with Mussolini. So his antecedents are too obvious to be ignored. See, he cannot be projected as the national leader. So finally what happened, they have been trying and trying. So from their own, the pantheon, they cannot produce one single national leader. But now, after Modi came to power, and emboldened by the successes RSS achieved in their many attempts to Brahminize the population, in some significant successes in pushing through their agendas, like removing secular-minded people from many cultural institutions like Central Censor Board, ICHR, Nalanda University, and then making the trashes written by Batra as compulsory reading for Gujarat schools. Then Garv Wapsi, which yielded some successes in some parts of the country. They are quite emboldened to finally settle down for the founder of RSS, Hedgewar, doctor. And now they say Hedgewar was also from Vidarbha, he from Maharashtra. Now they say the two doctors, Hedgewar and Dr. Ambedkar, Dr. Hedgewar and Dr. Ambedkar, they had similar visions. They had similar missions, similar visions, They had shared ideals. But is it really true? Even at the personal level, the two doctors cannot be compared with each other. There's Hedgewar is not even an MBS fellow. He had only a diploma like RMP, something like that, a licentiated medical practitioner. Whereas Dr. Ambedkar, he earned two doctors from the most prestigious educational institutions in the whole world. So I say that even at the personal level, even this educational literary qualifications, the two people cannot be compared with each other. And Hedgewar is far, far inferior to the scholarly nature and qualities of Dr. Ambedkar. But what happened is the RSS has a very perverted mind. Despite all these things, then they try to say the two doctors had similar ideals. Both of them were against untouchability. Both of them were against beef eating. Both of them were anti-Muslim. Is there any basis for that? See, because the RSS is known for its viability and lies. It is capable of shamelessly producing some distorted evidences. For example, then first we'll take up the so-called anti-Muslim opinions of Dr. Ambedkar. Because the projecting Ambedkar as an anti-Muslim is not new to the RSS politics. Even in 1990s, you can see hundreds of thousands of copies of pamphlets were printed and distributed by RSS in many states. They contained some passages taken out of context from Ambedkar's Pakistan or partition of India. It doesn't matter for the RSS that Ambedkar actually donning the cloak of a lawyer and presenting the case of Muslims in few pages, and Hindus in few pages, and secularists in few pages. He is a lawyer. In few pages he speaks like a lawyer of the Muslims. In some pages he speaks like a lawyer of the Hindus. In some other speeches he speaks like a lawyer of the secularists, a rationalist. So you cannot take some pages out of the context. Anybody can make anybody an anti-Muslim or anti-dialect by taking out of context a few lines from the corpus of the writings. That is the trick they played with the masses even in the 1990s. But I would like to quote a very important sentences from his this partition, Pakistan partition of India. Which refutes the argument of the RSS. The RSS logic is, by projecting Ambedkar as anti-Muslim, they want to present him as pro-Hindutva. What does he say in Pakistan, a partition of India? He says clearly and emphatically rejecting the notion of Hindu Rashtra. I am quoting his words. If Hindu Raj does become a fact, it will no doubt be the greatest calamity for the country. It is a menace to liberty, equality, and fraternity. It is incompatible with the democracy. It must be stopped at any cost. This is the words written by Ambedkar in this book, which RSS is so fond of quoting out of context. And in 1951, on the eve of the first general election in India, that time Ambedkar was the president of the Scheduled Caste Federation. And the manifesto prepared by the Scheduled Caste Federation clearly said, we must rule out any alliance with any reactionary party, such as Hindu Mahasabha and Jan Sangh.
Only these two he is referring.
Huh?
Only these two he is referring.
Because there are only two Hindu communal parties there. It clearly says we must rule out any alliance with any reactionary party, such as Hindu Mahasabha and Jan Sangh, which are communal parties. So where is the question of when Ambedkar, supporting in the Hindutva theory? Then as far as beef eating, Ambedkar, his core value with which he spoke, wrote and acted were liberty, fraternity and equality. And the liberty includes, amongst other things, one's right to choose the food of his or her choice. That is the fraternity means in respect to people or mingling with people, accepting them as their equals. People with different cultural traditions, people with different cultural ethos. The equality is equality for everyone in all spheres of life. So the liberty is an inclusive term. It is an all-embracing term, this liberty. So then how come the unparalleled leader of the Dalit masses, whose main source of protein is beef, how can he could have been against beef eating? It's quite illogical. What happened was, he asked Magas to stop the practice of eating the meat of the dead animals, because that was the practice forced upon them by the caste Hindus. Is it stopping that practice is a mark of self-respect. So actually he insisted that his followers, the Dalits, should stop eating this meat of the dead animals. What RSS actually distorts that statement into saying that Ambedkar was against beef eating itself. That means, that means that Ambedkar has violated his own core values of liberty, fraternity and equality. Nearly 65 to 70% of the Indian people are eating beef. Not only Dalits, Muslims are eating beef. A large number of Hindus are eating beef. Even I'm seeing for the last 20-30 years, many Hindus who look down upon beef eating as some kind of a taboo are going for beef for economic reasons, because it's cheaper, it's more nutritious. So what happens if you take into account the OBCs who are eating beef, Dalits who are eating beef, the tribal people who are eating beef, and minority religious people who are eating beef, the people in the northeast, it will come to about 65. You can commute it as some 65 to 70% of the people. It's a great insult to say that Ambedkar was against the food habits of the majority of the people in India. That's one thing. Then I said, as far as the Hindu question is concerned, what happens if the annihilation of caste is before our eyes? And so many writings in several volumes, collected writings and speeches of Ambedkar are still available in English and also in Marathi and so many Indian languages. But with all these evidences available, RSS resorts such blatant lies that Ambedkar shared the notion of Hindutva. I would say I would first start from annihilation of caste. In annihilation of caste, he first questions the very notion of Hindu. He asks whether the word Hindu is found in any Sanskrit text written before the British. It is not found in any vernacular languages of India as well. So when he is not stopped at questioning the very notion of the Hindu, and he is also talking about the so-called Hindu nation. I will read from his book.